welcome. You're watching Asia One News, and I'm Nazia Mahmood. Hello, and welcome to Asia One's newsroom. Iran declares its missile program is a red line and non-negotiable. These were the latest headlines. Details are available on asiaone.news. As investigations continue into the deadly Bondi Beach attack, U.S. forces have killed 14 people. Benin's president says loyal forces has crushed a rogue military faction that tried to overthrow the government. And what about Thailand and Cambodia's military capabilities? How can that be compared, Dave?
Well, Cambodia has said that it will carry out a fierce fight against Thailand. But long-term, Cambodia's military is no match for Thailand's.
World Health Organization warns that Gaza's Al-Aqsa hospital is operating at more than 3 times its capacity. A sweeping new report from J.P. Morgan Chase has claimed United States still leads the global AI race, but growing tensions with China and economic policy contradictions could undercut its edge. And Turkey became a safe haven for a baby gorilla.
Zaytun's journey from a cramped cargo box to a safe, growing young gorilla marks a rare success in animal rescue and international wildlife protection.
How is Washington citing bypassing Congress authority?
Well, that's right. And they spoke about this, Donald Trump and the other members of his cabinet, they spoke about this during Saturday's press conference, because normally if there was military action, they would need congressional approval for this.
It's not also the first time that a sitting president has been capped, speaking of Panama, Iraq, but I assume this is first non-surgical arrest of its nature.
Well, that's right. Panama, back in 1989, that operation that lasted several weeks to capture the then president of the country, that's almost 40 years ago. This was a much more surgical approach, an assault that happened very, very quickly.
So we learned after the press conference as well, it's the green light was given days before Christmas. Why do you think?
Yes, we're hearing that Donald Trump, as early as Christmas Day, December 25th, greenlight that operation, but it was a case of having to wait for the right weather conditions, wait for everyone to get into place and ready to deploy.
But it seems these protests are concentrated on the western borders mostly. Why is that? Your thoughts?
Of course, it's concentrated along the western borders because the provinces of Ilam, Kermanshah, and even Tabriz, those cities and provinces are located on the western borders, and they're bordering the Iraqi Kurdish regions, where we see some elements from PJAK, that is the Iraqi offshoot of PKK.
Pakistan's foreign ministry says Deputy Prime Minister and Foreign Minister Ishaq Dar has held a phone call with their Saudi counterpart to discuss the latest regional situation. We all understand that China does believe in boots on the ground. Now, is this just a diplomatic rhetoric, or will China take some concrete steps?
I think it's a good question. I think Chinese foreign policy analysts would probably tell you that, as we were saying, the boots on the ground discussions that are taking place in East Asia are more to do with whether or not China will be taking this as a signal when it comes to dealing with Taiwan.
The U.S. Senate blocked a resolution that aimed to limit President Donald Trump's authority to take further military action in Venezuela.
2 weeks, 3 weeks from now, who knows? These protesters will be back on the streets, and the agony of the Islamic regime will continue.
Mr. Khansari, also, despite the wide concern, the unrest hasn't really spilled over across the borders. Why do you think the escalation remained contained?
Well, because it has not reached a point where, for example, you have a civil war type of situation.
The U.S. is not in a rush because they're in a comfortable position, but Iran is against the wall and the protesters may come back any day. So what about Iran's internal dynamics? What about contingency planning, the security at the borders?
Well, I think that, number one, the problem in Iran and the question that is being asked is, if we are to see a change of direction in the policy that is being carried out, then this means that there has to be a change at the top.
What would really signal that there's a loss of control?
Well, I think that, if this situation erupts again, during the 12-day war with Israel, on the very first day, some 37 senior IRGC generals were killed. If there is no change of direction, and there's not going to be any change of direction so long as Khamenei is there, is going to result in victims of events that they cannot forecast.
And as well, an acting president, Delcy Rodriguez, has met with China's ambassador to Caracas. U.S. President Donald Trump is threatening to deploy the military at home as protests intensify in Minnesota after deadly federal immigration shootings. So, Ross, what message does the Board of Peace want today's global leaders to hear most urgently?
Board of Peace potentially trying to work on resolving other global conflicts which have unnerved some of the U.S. allies.
U.S. scientists are tracking monarch butterflies in real time. Geography has White House clarified whether this is a deterrent or, let's say, a preparation for action.
Now, I think that is the question. What we know about this armada is that, as Donald Trump mentioned, it is led by the aircraft carrier Abraham Lincoln. But given what's happened in Venezuela, we know that anything could happen. So I think there's a lot of interest in the president's latest message on Truth Social.
So how different is this U.S.-Iran standoff different than the previous ones?
I think in one sense the reason why it's different is because this particular standoff comes off the back of U.S. action in Venezuela.
Mitch, tell me, what de-escalation measures were attempted before the jet launched?
Well, we know that de-escalatory measures were taken. We don't know exactly what they were. Now, US Central Command spokesperson Captain Tim Hawkins said the Iranian drone continued to fly toward the ship despite de-escalatory measures taken by US forces operating in international waters. But they may have been visual measures, they could be electronic communications or radio warnings, but the US hasn't made clear what these measures were just yet. But I think it's also really important to note, it's also been reported that hours after this incident, there was a second separate incident where Islamic Revolutionary Guard forces reportedly threatened to board and seize a US-flagged tanker in the Strait of Hormuz.
Mitch, you're saying it's not yet confirmed if it was assessed as surveillance or provocation.
Yeah, that's right at this stage. The US hasn't revealed or hasn't given any information as to that. They did say that it was flying aggressively towards the USS Abraham Lincoln, so they had to take it down.
Tell me, in your thoughts, how significant is the carrier's location in international waters?
Well, this is very interesting. It's reported that it was 500 miles from Iran, and I think the Iranians are very cautious that these ships are getting closer.
Could this incident or a separate incident like you've mentioned complicate the upcoming talks between US and Iran on Friday in Turkey?
I think it's a very good question. I think it's very possible that could be the case. It's certainly not a good look and not a good start for these negotiations. It may increase American frustrations with Iranian officials.
So who do you think holds the power, Haqqanis or Kandahar, and how does it impact, Mr. Shirazi, the governance and especially security operations in Afghanistan?
Well, there are two kinds of powers now. One is the ideological power, which most of the Taliban fighters and groups show their allegiance to the supreme leader in Kandahar. Now, Sirajuddin Haqqani is a very powerful group when it comes to military maneuvers and the powerful armed commanders he had.
We are also finding it hard to comprehend why are internet shutdowns becoming a point of conflict.
Almost 2-3 months back, a decision by Mullah Haibatullah.
Brings me to my last question. Does this raise the risk of civil war or a regional spillover?
If there is a conflict which starts inside in the form of a local conflict between various Taliban groups. So it's a very serious issue because, again, if Afghanistan becomes volatile, it would be threatening the regional security as well as the international security also.
William, what's at stake today in emergency EU talks, I would say? I mean, what decisions are anticipated?
The bottom line is, from military personnel here, is that NATO is essentially up to the task. European officials who have said that simply the nature of this meeting happening in a few hours' time here in the Belgian capital has changed considerably.
In China, 36-year-old Li Xia, who lives with Duchenne muscular dystrophy, operates a high-tech celery farm from his bed. In the political pushback that the Democrats are putting up and also the response coming from the Trump administration. Now, are we expecting an independent review or a federal inquiry?
Well, there's certainly going to be a federal investigation into all of that, headed up by the FBI. It's unclear at this stage if there will be anything independent, separate of that. But like you say, it really comes down to there being a need for an independent investigation to try and work all of this out.
Japanese Prime Minister Sanai Takaichi and South Korean President Lee Jae-myung play drums to K-pop music. Okay, so do you think from Moscow's perspective, Donbas still negotiable?
Russia says it is not negotiable. It is enshrined into the Russian constitution. So Moscow wants the Ukrainian troops withdraw from the entire territory of Donbas. There are no Ukrainian troops on the ground, neither are there any foreign contingents.
Do you think Russia is open to a ceasefire following the referendum?
Well, at this stage, the Russian administration is saying that ceasefire that Ukraine is asking to be implemented to conduct a referendum or elections is something that is going to give Ukraine a chance to respite, regroup, rearm and remobilize.
The search for Malaysia Airlines flight MH370 has been set to resume on Tuesday after more than a decade. A 42-foot Christmas tree lights up Pakistan's Lahore, symbolizing not only festive cheer but also the country's peaceful and joyous celebration of Christmas. US President Trump has moved to widen a travel ban, announcing new restrictions on the travelers from 7 additional countries. Pakistan, during their Foreign Office briefing, has asked India to explain sudden changes in the Chenab River flow. This has not been the first time.
Well, there's a pattern in the military leadership, the civilian leadership. They've made it abundantly clear that any attempts to weaponize the issue of water will be considered as an act of war and that it will be responded to.
US and Ukrainian officials will continue discussions on Saturday in Florida following talks in Miami aimed at advancing a US-backed plan to end the war in Ukraine. Outside Washington, shoppers browsed handmade ornaments, treats and holiday decor. UNICEF has warned of a deepening humanitarian emergency in Gaza, where severe malnutrition among pregnant and breastfeeding women is now putting newborns at immediate risk. And we are going to speak of cricket, a very important match that is to be held. Pakistan will take on the arch rivals India. Pakistan crushed the United States by 32 runs in the ICC T20 World Cup clash. I'm Nazia Mahmood. Thanks for watching.